I'm vegan. I make videos on why people should be vegan. So what on earth does that title mean? Veganism is not the goal? If not, then what is? Well, first of all, let's be clear on the terms. What does veganism mean? Well, veganism, or at least when I say veganism, I mean a boycott of all the products whose production requires unnecessary animal suffering. So things like meat, right, and eggs, and dairy, and leather. For these things to be produced, right, there must have been an innocent individual who suffered. Okay? So if, for example, if there is meat on your plate, that means that there was an innocent individual somewhere who suffered and died, and whose some part of their tortured corpse is now on your plate, right? Like, without that suffering, that meat would not exist on your plate, right? So that's just one example. There are others like dairy and eggs and leather, right? So when I say veganism, I mean a total boycott of all such products whose production requires unnecessary animal suffering. So surely that sounds great, right? We would no longer be contributing to unnecessary animal suffering. How is that not the goal? Well, let me explain. All forms of discrimination, historically or presently, are caused by drawing an arbitrary line to exclude the members of a certain arbitrarily decided group from moral consideration. Like, think of any discrimination, right? That's the framework on which it functions. So, for example, if you exclude members of certain races, or even members of a certain race, simply because of their race, right? You exclude them from your moral consideration on that basis. That is racism. Racism, right? If you exclude members of a certain sex, that is from your moral consideration, then that is sexism, right? Similarly, when you exclude members of a certain species from your moral consideration, that is speciesism. And that, right, the assumption that not being part of a certain species, human beings, Homo sapiens, right, that not being a member of this species is a good enough reason to discriminate against certain individuals, underlies all that is wrong in our current treatment of non-human animals, right? They are a different species. Well, so what? How is that relevant, right? What is that morally relevant difference between humans and non-human animals that exists, which justifies our treatment of them, right? And if you can think of this morally relevant difference, right, if you can think of a trait, right, that human beings possess and non-human animals lack, or vice versa, then the logic would have to work as such, right? If you were to find a human being who lacks the trait that you said is what gives human beings the worthiness of moral consideration, if you find a human being who lacks that trait, it would follow from your own reasoning, right, that we would be justified to treat that human being in any way in which we currently treat non-human animals. For example, if you said that intelligence is the trait which gives human beings moral value, right, then it would follow from your reasoning that if we were to find a human being who had the same level of intelligence as a pig, right, or worse still, according to your logic, a level of intelligence that is even lower than that of a pig, then it would follow from your reasoning that we would be justified to treat that human being in which we currently treat pigs. And this is not me saying it, right? This is you saying it if you say that intelligence is what gives human beings moral worth, right? So you can look for this elusive trait, right, that human beings possess and non-human animals lack, which gives humans like the worthiness of moral consideration, I've tried, and I don't think you'll find it, right? So the point is that there is no morally relevant difference between human beings and non-human animals. So this exclusion of non-human animals from your moral consideration is as baseless, right, as the exclusion of members of certain race from your moral consideration. So that's speciesism, right? And if you still want to learn more about it, then I think Alex J. O'Connor, that's Cosmic Skeptic, his first video on veganism, I think it's called The Meat Eater's Case for Veganism, explains it really well. So if you want to watch that, I'll link that somewhere around here. In fact, it's a great video. I think you should watch it. But anyway, the reason I'm mentioning all of this is the following, right? When there is such a bias against a certain group, when a group has been so far left out of moral consideration, right, that usually results in a great deal of suffering imposed onto that group. I don't have to tell you the kind of suffering that was the resultant of racism. Right? I don't have to tell you the kind of suffering that was the result of sexism. And if you've been watching my videos, never mind watched my videos, if you've engaged with animal rights, right, if you've dealt with this issue, then you are well aware of the kind of suffering that has been caused due to speciesism, right? But here's the thing, whenever there is such an exclusion from moral consideration of a certain group happening, right, it seeps in so deep into people's minds, right, that it results in the formation of two kinds of people mainly, right? So there will be this one group which will be the mainstream sort of, that will continue to partake in that oppression, to partake in that tremendous unnecessary suffering, right? And then there will be this other group, right, who will not participate in that atrocity, in that moral atrocity, in causing such unnecessary suffering. But even within this group, right, this second group, most people will say, oh, what you're doing is horrible, what you're doing is outrageous, you need to stop. But they'll also say this with one caveat, right? They'll say it with, no, this group is not equal to us, right? This group is not equal to us. It's just that what you're doing is tremendous unnecessary suffering, and that their life and liberty is more important than the most trivial of your pleasures. That's what they say, right? And I can give you historical examples for this. Trust me, I can. But I'm pretty sure that if I do that, people will pretend to be offended, right? Even when they're not offended, right? So, and try to derail the conversation. And I'm not going to give them that chance. I'll give you a personal example. So, a thing about me, and I think that if you've even scanned through my channel, you'll know this, is that I'm an atheist, right? I don't believe that there is a God, right? And it follows from that I don't believe in any specific God, right? If I don't believe that there is a creator of the cosmos, I don't believe in any of the forms that have been imagined for that creator. So that, I say that, I often say that, I used to say that more often than I currently do, and that offends certain religious fanatics. I have had people come up to me in real life. I have people, and this is more frequent, messaging me online, telling me that I'm just a horrible person, and people say that I don't deserve to live, and that I should be burned, that my family should be burned, all sorts of things, right? And obviously that is not a pleasant experience. But what I've noticed here, right, is when I receive these kinds of comments on public posts, right, first of all, that is traumatizing, right? But right, then there will come other people from the same religion, and they will say, look, to that person, they say, look, what you're saying is just horrible. This is not what our religion teaches, right? Our religion is about peace and love. This is the kind of things that those moderate religious people will say. And I'm not saying that all religious people are like this, no. But this is the kind of things they say. They say, you don't have to think of this heathen, this atheist, this kafir, whatever the adjectives that they use. You don't have to think of him as your equal, right? But you also cannot tell him that you're going to kill him, or that you're going to cut his head off, you're going to burn him alive. You cannot say these things, right? You don't have to think of him as an equal. He's not our equal. He is lower than us. But the kinds of things you're saying, that is not acceptable, right? And so when people say things like, the life and liberty of an animal is worth more than human taste pleasure. Sure, the life and liberty of an animal the life and liberty of a non-human animal is worth more than human taste pleasure. But is that it? Is that the end, right? Is that the limit? No, right? It won't do it to say that the life and liberty of non-human animals is worth more than human taste pleasure. It's worth so much more than that. So the thing is that when people say these kinds of things, I see myself in those animals, right? And like today, this discrimination that I've experienced comes to me only in the form of me being an atheist, right? And I'm in a relatively safe country. Like, right, if I was in some other parts of the world, maybe I would not have been talking today, right? But if I lived in a different time, perhaps like 200 years ago, this form of talk would also come about me in the form of racism, right? When colonialism was rampant, right? There would be these at that time, right? This is not applicable mostly for today. At that time, there would be some white man who just thinks of me that he can treat me in any way he wants, and there will be this other white people saying, "Oh no, what you're doing is horrible." But these people would be in the minority, but they would say, "What you're doing is horrible. You don't have to think of him as your equal, right? You don't have to give him equal moral consideration, but know that what you're doing is cruel. You don't have to impose such unnecessary cruelty on this guy. He is not your equal. You don't have to give him equal consideration, but you can't treat him the way you're treating him." So when people say these kinds of things about non-human animals, about pigs and chickens and goats and cows and pigeons and ducks, I see myself in those animals, right? So my point is this, that the goal is not veganism. The goal is total animal liberation. So what does this mean, total animal liberation? Does this mean that human beings and non-human animals get the same set of rights? No. I'm not on about giving animals equal rights. I'm about giving them equal consideration for rights. And I'm not just doing some kind of mental acrobatics here. There are other arenas where we do this too, and where I do this too, right? So for example, human males, right, should not have abortion rights. Why? It's not because that they are somehow less worthy of rights, right? It's just that it doesn't make sense for human males to have abortion rights. They can't get pregnant, right? So we've given them the same moral consideration, and it just doesn't make any sense to give human males abortion rights. Okay, so that is what total animal liberation means. Not the same rights, but the same consideration for rights. So there you have it. Veganism is not the goal, total animal liberation is. And this is sort of the reason why, if you're around me, when people talk about things like stepping stones to veganism, you will see me getting mildly annoyed. Like, I won't say anything if they're not talking to me, because that's just not the kind of thing that I do. But you will see me getting mildly annoyed in my facial expressions and such. Because veganism is the stepping stone to total animal liberation. What sense does it make for there to be stepping stones to the stepping stones? Okay, so why am I making this video? Well, the purpose of this video is the same as the purpose of all my other videos, right? The primary reason, at least. It is to convince my viewers, you, of my own view, right? I hope to change a few minds. That's always the goal behind my videos. But there's also a secondary reason this time. So some time ago, I read this one line that really stuck with me. And it goes something like this: the wrong kind of vulnerability comes with pretending to be someone you're not. And I want to extend that. I want to say that that's true, but I also want to say that the wrong kind of vulnerability comes by not expressing clearly who you are, right? And especially so if you're living in a setup, in a society where your position cannot be known unless you make it clear, right? So I want to make my stance on animal rights very clear. My stance on animal rights is not that non-human animals can be used in any way we want them to. Like, that's not my position, right? But it's also not my position to say that the life and liberty of non-human animals is merely more important than human taste pleasure. That's not my position either. My position on animal rights is the following: that non-human animals deserve the same moral consideration for rights as human beings. That is my position. Okay. So that's it for this video. If you like the video, leave a like. If you love the video, subscribe to the channel. I've been Aditya Prakash, or Soytheist. You can follow me on social media here. If you like what I do, you can support me on patreon.com/Soytheist. And I'll see you in the next video.